Hello, hello. I hope everyone is doing well. I hope you can hear me well, see me well. Let me see. Okay, there you go. Okay, today will be a little bit of a quick live stream because I'm flying to China for 2 weeks this evening, and but I thought I would still run a quick live stream, and then I found an interesting topic. I think the annealing. I've seen on a couple of forums some different explanation on what annealing was, and I thought I would spend like maybe half an hour, and then we can do some research on what is annealing for 3D printing. I mean, what is annealing in general, and why some people are talking about annealing, or what it is and what it is for. So, as always, we're gonna start on our nice Google, and then we're gonna start our research, and then I will also explain some experience that I had, some knowledge that I can share. But let's see what's out there first, as we always do. How people perceive annealing in 3D printing. Okay, so let's see. First thing we have is an article from Prusa. So let's see how they explain what is annealing, right? And why is it useful? Probably everyone involved in practical 3D printing has been thinking about improving the physical and mechanical properties. Okay, you could try some special materials, but those are usually both expensive and hard to print. The only other obvious option is to tweak your printing settings. Yeah, and then there must be a better way. Annealing. Okay, so it looks like annealing is about improving mechanical properties, physical and mechanical properties. Okay, that's how they introduce annealing. Annealing is a process of increasing temperatures to improve firmness, tensile strength, and heat resistance of a given object. Annealing is the process of increasing temperature to improve firmness. Okay, so this is a little bit strangely explained. For me, annealing is the process of increasing temperature to improve. Okay, we'll finish this first. It's a well-known procedure when creating metal or injection plastic part. With 3D prints, it's just less known. It's applicable. Okay, so how does it work? In a nutshell, we're talking about heating plastic to a point where its molecules are able to rearrange, thus making their structure more firm, stable, with lesser inner tension. Okay, so the idea is to give energy to the different molecules so that they can move and rearrange themselves, right? We want to achieve a so-called glass fluorescent temperature. At such temperature, a printed object still retains its shape, but is softened, and there are ongoing changes at the molecular level, improving its structural stability. Okay, in the following chapter, we will explain the basic nature of the process from a physics point of view, why exactly annealing improves the mechanical and heat resistance. And if you're not much into theory, skip it. No, we're not going to skip it. I think it's very important to understand what exactly annealing is. So from a macromolecular structure, most of the commonly used 3D printing materials are polymers, long repetitive molecule chain. Polymers have two types of molecular structure, amorphous and semi-crystalline. Okay, there is no exact dividing line. There is no exact dividing line, though. Molecules could have various levels of arrangement. I'm not sure I agree with this. I think it's either it's completely amorphous, either it's semi-crystalline, either is a crystal, right? It's fully crystallized. But I think there is a pretty clear line, right? As soon as you start having crystal, then it's a semi-crystalline, or it's an amorphous. I'm not too sure why they say there's a blur line in between. Crystalline structure are usually harder and more rigid, similar to a diamond, even though that's not a polymer. Amorphous polymers are more elastic and flexible. Okay. If you heat up a plastic polymer inside a nozzle, its structure is likely to be amorphous. Imagine spaghetti, but with polymer chain instead of pasta dough. The plastic is then rapidly cooled down to room temperature. Therefore, its structure remains the same. Because the 3D printed part is mostly amorphous, its heat resistance, firmness, and tensile strengths are inferior to crystalline materials with organized molecular chain. Okay, I see where they're going there. Two type of molecular structure. Yeah, I think so. One of the main confusion for me in annealing material is the purpose of annealing for a semi-crystalline and the purpose of annealing for an amorphous polymer, right? Why do you anneal PC or ABS, and why do you anneal nylon or PPS, right? And the reason to anneal both of them are different, right? You don't anneal them for the same reason. So the way they introduce it for me is doesn't really help with that misconception. But let's continue. Glass reaction temperature. To improve the qualities of our prints, we need to rearrange. Hey, Silverback, does this information include that standard PLA can be annealed as well? Yeah, I mean, in theory, yes. A standard PLA can be annealed. Now the question is, can it be annealed while keeping its overall shape, right? Without expanding, shrinking, or deforming. So I guess that's the question. So some PLA are designed so that how should we call that? It crystallizes during the printing, so that those crystals will help during the annealing process. So I give you an example. If you print a part with let me change a little bit. If you print a part with regular PLA, right, that is not modified, in most cases they will be completely amorphous. Completely amorphous meaning that at 60 degrees C, so the glass transition temperature, it will soften. Okay, which means any type of load is going to deform the object, and so if you put it in the oven at 60 degrees, then it will basically collapse under its own weight, right? Because everything will soften. So any type of stress, even its own weight, will deform the part. But so some PLA, what they do is they modify them. So I don't know the details, but basically they are creating some like how do you call that? Nucleus point, I think, so that it's helping the polymer to crystallize during the printing process, which means that at the end, where after the printing, it will have a slightly higher crystallinity degree than if it wasn't modified, and that crystallinity degree that is higher than a 0 basically is going to give it a little bit more heat resistance. That extra heat resistance will allow you to anneal it even more. So let's say you print it and then it is able to sustain let's say 70 or 80 degrees C. Then you put it in the oven and then you anneal it at 70 or 80 degrees C, and then it's going to crystallize even more until majority of PLA maybe 140 or 145 degrees C heat resistance. So that's from a semi-crystalline point of view, right? Hey, 3D Medic Beans. I wondered, I know that Computer Medic is annealing some of the fibron. Yeah. So the reason to anneal, let's say nylon is the same as annealing PLA, but the reason to anneal PC and ABS is different. So it takes some type of additive in standard PLA to help it harden, as opposed to PLA, but just being able to do it by itself. So it takes some type of additive in standard PLA to help it harden, as opposed to PLA just being able to do it by itself. Sorry, what do you mean? So basically you add some additive that will allow the crystallization rate to be faster. You increase the crystallization rate, which means during the printing, usually the crystallization is not fast enough. So when you're printing PLA, then it doesn't crystallize. But you can add some additives so that it crystallizes faster. But one issue of crystallizing faster is that it usually will warp, because if it crystallizes, then it's gonna shrink, and if it shrinks, then it warps. So that's the pro and con, right? Hey, 30-minute Vince from Twitch now. Okay, but let's see how they continue explaining this. To improve the quality of our print, we need to rearrange the molecule chain to make them more arranged, ergo more similar to crystalline polymer. The higher level of arrangement could be reached by heating, or more precisely by reaching the correct glass transition temperature. So I melt that plastic a bit and it crystallizes, right? If we heat up crystalline material at a certain point, they just liquefaction or simply melting point. But there is a difference between a melting point and glass transition temperature. Amorphous polymers don't have an exact melting point. Instead of liquefying right away, they soften gradually. This range between a completely solid state and a liquid state is called glass transition temperature. Okay, for me, I wouldn't really explain it this way. I think how I would. Oh, sorry, I was not sharing the same way. How I would explain it would be like this. Actually, you know what? I think when I wrote the material science chapter, I think I explained this type of thing. So give me a second. Material science. This is how I explained it. I think this one. Yeah, this one. But do I have a better quality one? Give me a second. Maybe this one. Yeah, it's a little bit like this. I think it was called Training Industrial. I wrote a training document for internal purpose. And oh, there you go. I think I found it. Okay, and let me show you how I explain it. Let me share my screen again. So this is how I explain it. Blah blah blah. Okay, so let's go from the beginning, right? So basically, I went a little bit to the basic, but I think it's important, right? So polymer definition: polymers are large molecule or macromolecules formed by a large number of repeating units known as monomers. Blah blah. Okay. The polymerization process bonds the monomers molecule together in a chemical reaction, forming the backbone of the polymer. Okay, so that was explained also in the article, right? So you have a bunch of monomers, and then you polymerize them, and they become a chain of many monomers, which become polymers, right? The type of polymer produced can vary depending on the chemistry and composition of the monomer compound and that construct them, right? And then to make it easier, for example, ABS, right? You have A, B, and S, and then you polymerize them, and then you have ABS. A very simplistic, simple way. That's the reason you have many type of ABS. You can have more A than B and S. You can have more B than A and S, or I make it very simple, right? But there's many type of ABS, many type of PETG, etc., etc. Okay, and then there's different families of polymers. You have the thermoset, like rubber, for example, and then you have the thermoplastic. So the difference is that a thermoset, so there is some cross link. So you see, this is a polymer, right? If you the link between the monomer here, this is, let's call it, so it's a covalent bond, right? So let's call it like a primary bond, right? And then there is a lot of these chain together, and they are linked by secondary bond, okay? And when you hit them, then when you hit a polymer that is a thermoplastic, it's going to break the secondary bond, but it's not going to break this the primary bond, right? So it means you break all the secondary bond, and then you can reshape it because it's a bunch of spaghetti, right? You can reshape it, and then when you cool down, then it's recreating all the secondary bond, right? And so that's the reason. So you break the secondary bond, you reshape it, and you recreate the secondary bond, etc., etc. And you can do that multiple times. The problem with thermoset is that there is also some polymer like this, but in between the polymer, it's not a secondary bond. It's actually also a primary bond. So all the polymers, all the spaghetti are also connected with each other with a primary bond. So they are cross-linked, basically. I think that's what it's called. If you have heard vulcanization, meaning you cross-link the different polymers together, right? And if you break that primary bond, then you completely destroy the part, right? You're basically breaking the primary bond, so there's nothing left. So you cannot recreate this primary bond. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense on the difference between the two. And then within the thermoplastic, you have the semi-crystalline and then the amorphous polymers. So, for example, PET, nylon in semi-crystalline, and PS and polystyrene and polycarbonate or ABS, PETG, etc. for the amorphous. Okay, so semi-crystalline meaning the polymer can crystallize and start creating all of these crystal within the polymer, and amorphous cannot crystallize. Okay. And then how I explain this? So, I actually explain it here. So thermoset are polymers that are irreversibly cured from a soft solid or viscous liquid pre-polymer into a solid polymer. The curing process is also known as cross-linking, which proceed via a chemical reaction that connects all the monomers and pre-monomers to form a network structure. A cured thermoset can no longer be melted and is usually not thermally processable. Okay, so you can see you have all the polymers, and then you basically link them together, right? And once they're linked together, then you cannot break them anymore. And then the thermoplastic, like I just explained, you don't link them together. They are linked by what we call like secondary bond, okay, which can be broken if heated enough, and then recreated when it cools down. Okay. And then what's the difference between amorphous and semi-crystalline? Amorphous polymer are identified for having disorganized structure. This means that the polymer chain are randomly oriented and intertwined, okay, like this. And then the semi-crystalline is the same as amorphous, but there is some areas that are that has a crystalline structure, okay. So and sometimes you can have a semi-crystalline that is completely amorphous, and you have to crystallize it. Okay, you have to, for example, you have to anneal it, so it start creating the crystal. But an amorphous material, even if you anneal it, it will stay amorphous, right? It's not going to create the crystals. Okay, and then how do I explain glass transition temperature, crystallization temperature, and melting temperature, right? I know here they explain it in a certain way, but for me, I explain it in this way. So the glass transition temperature is the temperature that basically will start breaking the secondary bond. Okay, so you have all the spaghetti together, and then when you reach TG, all the secondary bond will start to break. So it means, so let's say you have a bunch of spaghetti, right? And then let's say they're linked together, right? If they're linked together, then they're pretty strong. And when you heat up, and then when you reach TG, all the link between the spaghetti, they just break. Then suddenly all the spaghetti, boom, they just fall into a mess of spaghetti, right? So that's TG. And when it comes to a semi-crystalline, it's the same. The semi-crystalline, when you reach TG, the amorphous region of the polymer will also soften, but all the crystal around it will kind of maintain the overall structure because the crystals are not going to soften. Okay, what is the TC? The TC is the crystallization temperature. It's not really the temperature at which you can form the crystal. it's the temperature at which the crystal will form the fastest. Okay, so the crystal can form at pretty much any temperature, more or less. But if it's too cold, okay. Here's how you can picture it. Sorry, I think I have like a. If I turn my head like this, it's hurt. You can see it like this for the crystallization temperature. All the polymers, they have some type of energy, right? And the higher the temperature, the more energy they have. So the more energy, the faster they can move. So if the temperature is not too high, they can move, and they are going to slowly form all the crystals, right? If you give more temperature, then they are going to form the crystal faster because they have more energy. But if you give too much energy, then they are going to move. They are going to try to form the crystal, but they still want to move. They still want to move. There's too much energy, and then the crystal deform, right? So it form and then deform. And the more and the higher you increase the temperature, and then the crystal cannot even create, right? And the TC is the sweet spot. The sweet spot that the polymer have enough energy to directly, very quickly form the crystals, but not enough energy to break the crystal. Okay. So TC is the ideal temperature for crystallization. And then TM is the melting temperature. TM is the temperature that is high enough to break the crystal. Okay. So if the melting temperature is the temperature at which it breaks the crystal, now you realize that any polymer that is an amorphous polymer, not a semicrystalline, that doesn't have any crystals, then it doesn't have any melting temperature, right? Because it's defined as breaking the crystal. But if there is no crystal, then there is no melting temperature. Okay, it's basically at TG. At TG, it will become soft. Okay, you break all the secondary bond, and then that's it. It will just become more and more malleable, right? Blah 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 blah. Okay, so that's the glass transition temperature, crystallization temperature, melting temperature, and decomposition temperature. Decomposition temperature is the temperature at which you are going to break the primary bond. So the TG, you start breaking the secondary bond, and the TD, the decomposition temperature, you start breaking the primary bond, right? You start completely degrading the material. So you can see here, you have the polymer, and then at TG the polymers start to move. At TC they start creating the crystal very fast. At TM the crystals are destroyed, and then at TD you completely destroy the polymer. Okay, so that's the different temperature. So now when it comes to annealing, what's happening in annealing, right? When you anneal a semi-crystalline, you are creating these crystals, right? And the idea is that you want to reach the highest crystallinity degree of the polymer. And what is the crystallinity degree? Is the ratio between the crystal area and the amorphous area. So let's say there is 50% of the polymer that is crystals and 50% that is amorphous. Then that 50% is kind of the crystallinity degree, right? And then if it's 100%, then it's a complete crystal, right? And then if it's 10%, then there's only 10% of the polymer that has crystallized. And for some materials, you have different maximum crystallinity degree. So let's say, I don't know, you take a nylon, and maybe the nylon is 30%. The highest crystallinity degree is 30%. And after printing, you only obtain like maybe 10%. Then you anneal it in order to reach the maximum crystallinity degree, which would be 30%. So you go from 10% to 30%. Okay. And what is the reason to have crystal? What is the reason to have crystal is exactly what I just explained. At TG, it will start to soften. If it's softened at TG, then let's say it's completely amorphous. Let's say you have a nylon, you finish printing the nylon, and then it's completely amorphous. Then it's going to be very soft at TG, right? But let's say you take that nylon and then you crystallize it. then now it has a much higher heat resistant temperature, right? So basically you crystallize it and you are going to destroy the crystal at Tm. So now the heat resistance simplistically will go from Tg to Tm, kind of, but actually it's like a gradient, right? Because from Tg to Tm, you will have the amorphous that is going to go softer and softer. You only have the crystals that's going to maintain more and more the overall integrity of the polymer. Okay, now maybe the question is the following: why do you anneal amorphous material? What's the point? What's the point to anneal PC if it's not going to create any crystal? The crystal are improving the mechanical and thermal properties. Then what's the point of annealing amorphous material? What's the point of annealing ABS, PC, ASA, PTG, blah blah blah? What's the point? Okay, before I answer this question, let's continue the Prusa article. Okay. There is a difference between a melting point and glass transition temperature. Amorphous polymer don't have an exact melting point. Instead of liquefying, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's what we just explained. Yeah, okay. And then printing temperature and melting temperature are different, right? In most cases, I don't think you'll be able to print at the melting temperature. Printing temperature is defined as the temperature that will, let's say, liquefy the polymer enough to be processable by your 3D printer, right? Which I think is might be similar to melting, but for me, I think it's quite different from the melting temperature. Okay, transformation of amorphous polymer into semi-crystalline structure. Forming of crystals inside the polymer could only occur when the temperature reaches the glass transition, but always stay below the melting point. For amorphous polymer, their melting point is when the glass transition ends. At that point, the molecular structure shatter and the molecules start to move freely. On the contrary, at temperatures below the glass transition temperature, the molecules are too numb to move sufficiently. Okay, so I still feel that the explanation of primary bond and secondary bond is a little bit better. But yeah, let me know what you think, right? Which one, in which way you would have understood the best, the difference between the glass transition temperature and melting point. How to choose the right temperature? Usually amorphous polymer have quite a wide margin between the beginning of the gas transition temperature and melting point. For example, PLA, we are talking about a range of 65 to 170, blah, blah, blah. It's quite simple. The higher the temperature, the more the individual layer merge together, thus increasing the firmness of the object. However, the material also shrinks, warps, and at a certain point it softens so much the object just collapses. Obviously, to get the best result, we have to find a sweet spot between keeping the dimensions and shape correct and making the object as firm as possible, blah, blah, blah. How different filament react to annealing? The different PLA, PTG, ASA, and ABS, 3 of them coming from our own production line, blah, blah, blah. We printed everything at 100% infill. Comparison to untreated, blah, blah, okay. Okay, so they try to anneal at different temperature. Annealing temperature. I'm trying to see where they start explaining why you need to anneal ABS and why you need to anneal PLA, for example. Because annealing, actually, they don't even talk about it. Let me see. Oh, by the way, if you guys want to see this, there you go. Yeah, they don't really talk about heat resistance. Together with part of tensor strength, we also anneal batches of 2 standardized samples, blah, blah. Okay, so here's the result. If you anneal at 20 degree, the heat deflection temperature. So in theory, ABS, ASA, and PTG should not change. And in this case, and PLA should change a lot when you anneal it. And in this case, you can see that ABS, ASA, they are similar. There is an increase between 20 degree to 70 degree, and after that is similar. And then PTG is similar until the 110. But let's see how they explain that, because ABS, ASA is not going to crystallize. So basically, when you anneal ABS and ASA, there's nothing much that will change that will increase its SGT in theory. So let's see how they explain this. Blah blah blah. Both ASA and ABS did not change its characteristic almost at all, while PTG value didn't start to improve until 110. Heat resistant PLA dramatically increased annealing, blah, 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 okay. After performing all this, we evaluated the result at this temperature, blah, blah. While durability, we classified the ASA and ABS as outright unsuitable for annealing. In every test, they consistently score worse than PTG. Yeah, okay, so maybe that's the reason why we need to do a little bit of some theory here. ASA and ABS are not going to crystallize. So there's no point to anneal. So okay, so here's the reason why you would anneal amorphous polymers, right? Like PC, ABS, or ASA. The reason is the following: when you're printing, especially if you don't have a heated chamber, or if you don't have the optimal condition. Let's say you're printing with ABS and you don't have the optimal condition. What's going to happen is you're going to create a lot of internal stress, right, in your parts. So you can see it like this. You can see it as a polymer that you are forcing through a die. So you are building a lot of stress in that material. And actually, I think I also explained that in my material science chapter here. So when you're forcing the polymer through a die, you are creating a lot of stress. You are stretching the polymer. When you're stretching the polymer, you're creating a lot of stress. And what's going to happen is that over time, the polymer will want to come back. It's like an elastic band, right? When you print it, you're going to stretch it, and then over time it will want to come back. And the problem is when it comes back, then it's creating stress in your print, and it's going to create some micro cracks. And these cracks is going to make your part weaker. Okay, so what you're doing is you're putting it in the oven, you're annealing it, and you're giving enough energy so that the elastic band can release the stress without impacting the macrostructure of the part. Meaning that we were talking about the secondary bond, right? So let's say you have two stretch elastic here like this, right? And they both want to come back, but the problem is they are linked by the secondary bond, because it's let's say you're below TG, right? You're just at room temperature at 25 degrees C, and then they will want to come back, and then the secondary bond is still pretty strong, and then it's going to crack many parts of the part. But if you anneal, you give enough energy so that you are weakening the bond, so they can reshape themselves. So they release the internal stress, right? And then after that, the part will maintain its mechanical property. So if you do a test, and that's actually something we can do in Prinstbusters, is if you print ABS sample and you print it at a very unoptimal condition, and then you print, like, let's say you print 20, and then every day you are testing the mechanical property of each sample, then you are going to see that it's going down. It's going down because the more you leave it, the more the internal stress are going to impact the overall mechanical property. But let's say we have a test samples that we are actually annealing. We anneal all of them, and then we test them every day, and every day is going to be the same because we have released all the stress. Okay, so yeah, hopefully that makes everything a bit clearer. I will I shared the link already of this article here. Some information are interesting, like for example the PTG. Could it be that PTG start crystallizing at 110 degree? Maybe. We don't know. And then this the paper that I wrote should also be available in Printbusters, right? I'm explaining what warping is, which has started Printbusters, right? There is still a lot of for me there is still a lot of misconception of what warping is, and I'm writing here the what I think what is warping, and how to fix warping issue, right? How to release internal stress. But we can come back to this at a future stream. Okay, like I said, I just wanted to do a very quick stream. Like I said, I'm sorry, I'm leaving to the airport tonight, and then I will spend 2 weeks in China. I will still try to live stream for Printbusters. Otherwise, Computer Medic will also live stream. But yeah, any particular question for today? Hi, Paisley, Devenchi, J Sims Printing, Additive Atom. Sorry, I didn't see you guys join. How is everyone? I have a lot of HTPLA from Protopasta. I've never played with annealing. Yeah, so HTPLA, my guess is this. HTPLA is modified so that it has a faster crystallization, which means that after printing, you have a slightly higher heat resistance, which allow you to anneal the print without it softening or deforming. Okay, great. Then thanks again for joining today. Make sure you join our Printbuster server to discuss any 3D printing science, research paper, etc. And yeah, I think that's it. Thanks again. Hope you learned some stuff today. I wish you a good weekend. And for people in the US, I think you have a Labor Day on Monday or something like this. So I wish you a good 3-day weekend. Have a good evening.